We're ready. Good morning.
Morning.
So you have my bio in there, but I'm going to introduce myself in a short and fun way, I guess. Nancy Frasta from the Diocese of LA. I serve two fabulous little congregations. They're not that little, actually. One in East Hollywood, which I call my scrappy church. It's always on the verge of falling apart, but it's full of life and transformation and just doing God's work out in the community. So yeah, it's scrappy and it's lovely and it's wonderful and it's doing God's work. And then the other congregation is St. Mary's Koreatown, which I spoke a little bit about in the previous workshop. And the Reverend Anna Olsen is the rector there. I'm the associate there, and we are a team of a little crazy. Our congregation is in the middle of Koreatown, but it's a Japanese American church with a growing Latino congregation. I do a lot of work with Anthony Guillen, the missionary for Latino and Hispanic Ministries. Currently, we are in Miami. Well, they're in Miami. I just flew in from Miami because we had another event over there, which you will hear about today. And I love the work that we are doing in Latino ministry. I think it's amazing and it's beautiful and it's very challenging in many ways. I grew up in a Spanish-speaking congregation, which Spanish-speaking I will challenge you to think in a different way now. But my parents came in thinking that it was a Roman Catholic church, so they took me into so I could make my first communion. And I made my first communion in like good Latino family. We never went back after that. My parents just decided that Sundays, they could do the laundry or other good stuff. And I started going to the church by myself. I really connected with the priest there, and it spoke to me. And at 16, I went to my parents and said, I am becoming a priest. And my mother said, you are crazy. And I said, Mama, I'm becoming a priest. And by the way, we're Episcopalians. We're not Roman Catholic. And that was her introduction to the church. She is now one of my biggest cheerleaders. And I am very honored to come and speak to you about Latino ministry and challenging you to think about Latino ministry as something beyond Spanish speaking. Just because we are so focused on that, and it's a great ministry. For the people that were here in the workshop earlier today, the border issues, the immigration, that has been the driving force of Latino ministry. And it's a very, very important ministry. That's something that we cannot ever really get rid of, because immigration is not going to stop no matter how many walls or whatever you decide to put up. But, moving on. Well, before I move on, I wanted you to think about this little picture that is going to come up throughout my presentation. And it's a picture of a grandmother with her grandchild, and the grandchild saying, sorry, I don't speak Spanish. This is going to become more and more, well, it is the reality, and it's just going to continue to grow. But, since I do not want you guys to forget me, please connect with me. I want us to continue the conversation. I think it's very important that this continues, especially in the positions that you are in, the struggles or blessings you might be experiencing. I think it's something that we need to connect and share with the whole church. In this last General Convention, I was part of Anthony Guillen's team, and we were doing a lot of social media. We're big on social media right now. And we decided that it would be really interesting to find all the people that were running for presiding bishop and do videos with them. And ask them, what is your hope for Latino ministry in the Episcopal Church? Everybody gave fabulous answers, but I thought it would be worthy to hear what our now presiding bishop had to say. And this was before he was elected. I'm trying to figure out how to make this play.
My question for you today is, what is your hope for the Latino ministry in the Episcopal Church?
I really do have a dream and a hope for the Episcopal Church that one day and soon, and very soon, the face of the Episcopal Church will look like the faces of all our people in all our countries. That when the Episcopal Church resembles the face of all of our people, then we are truly Catholic. Then we are truly universal. So I really believe we have to multiply and expand and grow the Latino ministry and grow in communities where we are not, and grow in communities where we are. And this church, I believe evangelism. I believe evangelism, and one of the places in communities we have to do that wherever we are in our Latino communities here in the United States and abroad.
Thank you.
Thank you. God bless you.
That fabulous reporter is my younger sister. Isn't she adorable? I thought she looked like you, but I was like, it's not like you. Such a cute. So, hope for Latino ministry in the Episcopal Church. A church that resembles the face of all of our people. All of our people. Every single one. So these are some pictures from some of the communities that I serve. And I heard this video over and over again while I was praying about this workshop. And I just kept thinking about these faces. And I'm sure in your communities you have many really beautiful faces there. And I started thinking about the grandmothers and the kids. And how they all are part of our Latino ministry. But they're speaking very different languages. They are growing up very different. Now, Hispanics are the fastest growing ethnic segment, expected to grow 167% from 2010 to 2050, compared to 42% of the total population. So, I mean, this is obvious, but I mean, I think it's really important that we continue to hear this over and over again. Now, immigration is going down. There's less people coming in. But for the bajillion of us that are already here, we're having children. Our children are growing up and they're having children. Now, I found very interesting one of the Nelson reports that I was reading that the birth to death ratio for Latinos is 8-to-1. Okay? Birth to death, 8-to-1. For non-Latinos is 1-to-1. So that says a lot of where our church is going and what our church is going to look like. Now, I also want to say, Latinos are not just getting married to Latinos. Okay? They're getting married. I mean, races are mixing more and more. That means that there's going to be this whole new generation coming up that if the church doesn't start thinking about how to evangelize to them, we're going to lose them all. The current tradition of models for Latino Hispanic ministry are focused on reaching the first generation monolingual immigrant Latinos. This does not normally attract or include the second, third, fourth generations or English dominant Latinos. So like I said, first generation is important. If there hadn't been ministry for first generation, I would have never been ordained in this church. Yeah, so we need that. We need the first generation. For the people that were here for the border issue workshop, one of the things that, one of the things that Colin was talking about the border and all those real issues, that's something that a lot of the people in my congregations have lived and that I have lived. I am a DACA recipient, meaning that I crossed the border illegally when I was a child. So what he was talking about, like that was my life. Not having a license. Lovely Anna Olsen here is so gracious to give me rides because I don't drive. I never learned to drive because I couldn't get a license anyway for being in this country illegally. But this is my country. I am more of an American than I am a Mexican. I came here when I was 8 years old. And that is why the Latino ministries that are focused on those first generations are excellent. Be there, raise leaders. Because those leaders are going to continue, those leaders are going to be the face that are going to continue our ministry. So, I don't know if you guys know the Reverend Al Rodriguez. He is in the Seminary of the Southwest, and he does this great work, and I love this. Thinking about the generation of Latinos in the iceberg. And that little boat, he calls it the USS Episcopal. But he says that we are just going around and focusing on the top part. 1/3 of the Latino Hispanic population, immigrants and first-generation Latinos, and the primary focus of the Episcopal Latino Hispanic ministry. 2/3 of Latinos is the multi-generation Latinos, second generation and up, not normally part of the Episcopal Latino Hispanic ministry. We're missing out on all that. That's sad. That is so sad. And he has this term, transgeneration, and that is Latino Hispanic ministry that recognizes the need to address the entire Hispanic population rather than just the tip of the iceberg.
Is this from Tom? Or?
No, this is from Al Rodriguez,
Okay.
but they work together because they have that New Camino.
Right. And
So this
so I saw that term and I was like, exactly what does that mean?
So if I want to talk a little bit about New Camino. If I forget, remind me to
Okay.
mention it, because I think that's a program that every diocese should be having. So, I want to talk about Hispanicize. Like I said, I just flew in from Miami, and a group of us, that lovely picture on the side, we're part of this program, Hispanicize. This has nothing to do with church, by the way. We're the only religious people there, and it's 3,000 of the most influential Latinos in the country, and they gather to network and learn. Talking about bloggers, journalists, TV and movie personalities, tubers, viners, and I'm sure I misspelled some of these words because I don't even know what they were, but I mean these are real personalities. And 80% of the conference was in Spanglish. There was very little need for Spanish-only workshops. And because the new generation of Latinos are not necessarily attracted to Spanish only. So one of the things that this event does is they gather people, and they have Toyota, Coca-Cola, Verizon, all these big companies sponsor the event. And they go and they present studies. Knowing that Latinos are the number one minority majority in the US, how do we sell to them?
Yeah. Right?
So they spend $1 billion to do these studies, and we get to go there and learn it for free. And the thing that kept popping up over and over again, just look at my notes, from the keynoters, from all the speakers, was, in marketing terms, know your brand, know your consumer. So how does that translate to us? Know our message and know our community. We have a fabulous message of Jesus loves you. You are beloved. We have the gospel. We don't need to go searching for this quick and nice little message to brand, because we already have it. Now we take it out to our consumer, which is the community. And where we're lacking is that we're not really paying attention to our communities. So in order for us to look further, I want to just really quickly go, and if you've done the New Camino, you've seen some of this before. When I'm talking about the generations, what does that mean? So first generation, foreign-born, generation 1.5, foreign-born child brought to the U.S. before age of 4 to 5 or educated in the U.S. So I fall into this category. So I'm 1.5. The second generation, U.S.-born person with at least one foreign parent. Third generation, U.S. person with 2 U.S.-born parents or at least one foreign-born grandparent. And then we have the fourth generation that Al Rodriguez likes to call los americanizados. So very little Spanish. They still have a connection to the culture and the heritage, but they have been here for generations, mostly professionals. 93% of second generation Latinos speak English well or very well, a stark difference from the first generation. Less than half of the Latino immigrants say they speak English well, and 20% say they speak no English at all. So language proficiency makes a big leap in the generations. In the second generation, immigrants are substantially more likely to intermarry than the general population. So that's what I was speaking about earlier. 26% of the second generation Latinos are married to someone from a different race or ethnic group, compared to 8% of immigrants and 8% of all US adults. So recognizing the I have a problem. My accent doesn't let me say that word correctly in English. How do we say that?
Evangelization.
Evangelization. I'm blaming that on my accent, alright guys? Evangelization, bitches. Linking the Latino ministry according to the generational acculturation linguistic realities that target Latino population. Recognize the second, third, fourth generation Latinos It is a cultural
Competence.
thank you. Not necessarily Spanish fluency, that is what is most needed. So we need Latino Hispanic ministry, not Spanish service. So let's take a moment on that. We heard from Colin about the importance of language. Yes, I am not saying language is not important. Language is very important. But if we're thinking about doing Latino ministry, and we just focus on doing Spanish, we're missing a whole lot of people. We're missing all the children that are growing up in the congregations right now.
Yep.
Many multicultural, multi-generational Latinos, especially those of 35 and under, feel more comfortable in cross-cultural settings and worship.
Could I say something?
Yes, please.
Just very quickly about that, because that is very important. When a diocese that starts on a Spanish-based, language-based ministry, what happens is that when the kids reach the level of middle school, they stop attending church usually. That's when we lose the kids, and we see that they come and they don't want to be part of it. And then the parents quit, bring them to church, and the church doesn't offer opportunities for them because everything is Spanish things. So that is it is one of those things that it is very important. I mean, it is great to have clergy like Nancy who is able to recognize the signs, but usually that happens a lot with dioceses that have monolingual, monocultural clergy. Unfortunately, it's a phenomenon. So just something to think about.
So again, okay, please go ahead.
It's an important topic. I would also just say that sort of the flip side of that, because I also have heard on many occasions people saying, well, they'll just start going to the English service, right? But that doesn't happen either.
No, that's happening.
We see at St. Mary's, we have a number of young adults who are English dominant, have grown up in the United States, and they float back and forth, but you're more likely to find them in the Spanish service. And part of what they would say, I believe, is don't make me choose between being able to express the fullness of who I am and going to church with my mother. That if, we ask people to split themselves when we sort of say, well, you can be Anglo and English, or you can sit next to your mom in church only in Spanish, and if you want to express yourself, you have to do it in Spanish in that context. So that's where this Latino Hispanic ministry and the cultural competence, I actually think we have more clergy at this point in the Episcopal Church who are able to function in Spanish than we do who are fully culturally competent to lead multicultural congregations.
Yeah, that's true.
So let's talk a little bit about bilingual services. Who likes them? Me. Yes.
I do.
I loved when Colin said, yeah, no, they don't, yeah, bilingual services, they're tricky.
They're tricky.
They're tricky.
They're so tricky. What do you do? One of the things that I was here, they're so long. They're so boring. And
People
that,
say that even when they're actually shorter.
I know, they really are short. Some of them are short. When we are developing Latino Hispanic ministry that is going to focus on not just first generation and second generation, we seriously have to think about how to do bilingual better. Okay? It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do a bilingual service every Sunday. You just have to be a bilingual, bicultural community. Okay? So we brought some stuff because I wanted to show you guys. One of the things that St. Mary's and Trinity, both the congregations that I work with, are doing is every Sunday we have our liturgy booklets. Good old liturgy booklet. And every Sunday we have seasonal booklets. They are bilingual, side to side.
Sure, thanks.
Okay, so, and you can see some of the music. Now, one of the things that we've discovered is that, at least in our context, the Latinos are comfortable singing when they have the words, not necessarily all the fancy music stuff. So, the music is, if you're comfortable and you can know how to read music, fabulous. Here's
It's on page 4 and 5.
some of that good stuff. But if you just need the words, like myself, it's right here. So now you are creating a culture where everybody feels like they can participate. So one of the things that happens is we have our service at 10 a.m. in English, or 9:45, depending on what Sunday it is. Sometimes we have some of the young kids coming in with their parents who only speak Spanish come and sit through the service. What a fabulous idea. It's all about hospitality, that the kid can enjoy the service in his language and the parent can follow along, or the other way around. In the Spanish service, and I've seen a lot of the kids at Trinity do this, the parents are following along, and I have little Anna reading in English and doing the prayers in English. She has them side by side. So this is part about becoming a community that is bilingual and bicultural. You're offering those things to them in all the services. I don't think it costs much.
Just the paper. I mean, it also means that when we do bilingual services, we do them out of the same booklets that people use every week. And so they look familiar and people already know how to navigate them. And there's not that sense of, oh my God, there's Spanish in here and I'm lost.
So how do you handle the readings?
Good question. So what we do with the readings is we'll do one in English.
We do a weekly version of this that supplements, that has the meanings of the
Yeah.
languages.
So, but the one will be read in English and another one will be read in Spanish. The only thing that we tend to do, we double up, is the gospel.
Right.
So the gospel is read in whatever language. Not recently, in July we had a quadrilingual service in Korean, Japanese, English, and Spanish. Yeah, that was awesome. And you know, we try to.
We should have brought that literature.
We should have brought that.
Nancy put it together.
We did the gospel in all languages. We want to make sure that if you're there and you're not speaking, your language is not being spoken, that it's somewhere in here that you can follow along. So this is a big part of how to start moving beyond the Spanish speaking. Anybody have any questions on this?
Did you guys do some of this translation yourselves? I mean, where did you get all this Spanish content?
It's the prayer book.
It's mostly prayer book. We use a bilingual hymnal. It's a Roman Catholic hymnal called Oramos Cantando. And it actually we have found it has many of the favorites from the 1982 hymnal, and they all have singable English and Spanish. And it also has many favorites from the Latino communities I've served, all of whom have different repertoires. So, but it's quite a good sampling. So, like, This Is the Feast, for example, comes from Oramos Cantando. What is it in English? We pray in song?
Yeah, we pray in song.
Yeah, it's kind of an ugly orangish brownish color, and they're only $15 a piece. We actually bought a whole congregational set at St. Mary's, and we use it mostly instead of the 82 or any Spanish language.
But you just Xerox that in here? Or
Just with the PDF, you can
Okay.
clip it and make it an
Okay.
image
Oh.
and just insert.
so you have it digitally,
Yes.
the hymnal?
No,
No,
in fact, this is why it's slightly at an angle.
Okay, yeah,
Yes.
so you Xerox
Snap
it.
copy, yeah.
We
Okay.
just scanned it and pasted it into the.
But with the words you do what you were saying. You have the Spanish prayer book digitally. Is that
Yes.
right? Okay.
Yeah, we type it.
and you
type
might
it.
want to just have a Spanish speaker kind of go over some of the stuff because the translation is kind of horrible in the BCP in Spanish.
Oh, really?
So you have to tweak it a bit. That's the major thing. So before I go on, I actually wanted one of you guys to turn to page 20 and 21. Because one of the things that has become a big connector in our communities is our blessing song. And it's sung in Japanese, and English, and in Spanish. Everyone sings those three languages. And it's so beautiful. And a big reason why Anna is here is because I want her to kind of teach it to you, because I can't sing to save my life. So, Yeah, I think it would be fun to just kind of, for you guys to take this back with you as sort of a blessing in different languages. So.
You're gonna make me sing?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You're gonna see that it's true that she really can't sing if I'm the singer in the pair. It goes something like this. Kirisoto no heiwa ga watashi tachi no kokoro no sumi ni made yuki wakarimasu yoni. May the peace of Christ be with you. May the love of God dwell deep in your heart. May the Spirit enlighten your way. May you walk in the comfort of God's care. La paz de Cristo sea contigo y el amor de Dios en tu corazón. Que el Espíritu te ilumine, que camines cuidado por tu Dios.
Oh, go ahead.
Find the music for this.
It's out there. Our musician has a like a choir sheet for it. So I think if you just Google the first line, Kirisuto no Heiwaga, you'll find it in Japanese and English. I did the Spanish translation, so you're welcome to that. But it's around. It's a popular, like if you YouTube it, there's like a gazillion different cute people singing it. It started as a Japanese language song, I think, but I don't actually really know its history. We learned it at the Japanese convocation of EAM meeting in Hawaii about 5 or 6 years ago and brought it back to St. Mary's. Traditionally performed in Hawaii with the ukuleles, so we have a little ukulele choir that plays along with it.
And so this song has become really a great way for people to kind of connect. For the older Japanese congregation to see all the cute little Latino kids singing it in Japanese, English, and Spanish, and then to see the Latino congregation like really want to do it both in Japanese and in English. I mean, it's really beautiful.
Well, I was just thinking about it because when I was working with Latino Ministry, we had a song that the Anglo congregation, Spanish congregation, we all sang together in bilingual services. There was this one song, it was Episcopal, right? But what was interesting about it was how that was reflective of their unique identity as a bilingual parish. And this has the same thing, it's the reflection of the unique identity of the parish.
It gives us a chance to tell the story too, which because St. Mary's has a very particular history in the Japanese American community, I think there's a lot of fear in that community that that part of the history will be lost as the neighborhood has, the neighborhood had changed a long time ago actually. So it also gives us that chance to just honor the ancestors of St. Mary's. Nobody really speaks Japanese at St. Mary's anymore.
We have two
Japanese immigrants, yeah. But it gives us a chance every time we bring new people in. Oh, why do we sing a song in Japanese? Well, it's because this church was started by Japanese immigrants. And so it gives the new people that connection, and it also gives the lifelong members a sense that that heritage is being passed forward.
And I think that's key in developing, redeveloping churches or planting, well, not in planting churches, but redeveloping, or where there's a community there before. You need to honor those who were there before, those who have made it what it is. Or else there's going to be so many hurt feelings and there's going to be so much pain in the grief. And Anna will actually speak a lot about that because like I said, it's not easy. It's not easy doing this. It gets really, really dirty really dirty at times. But one of the things that I wanted to go before Anna speaks is in planting churches or redeveloping, we need to focus on the culture. The language is going to play a role with it, but we can't continue to keep missing out all these people that are growing up in this country. And Anna can kind of go a little bit on that. I wanted to share this picture about, it's in St. Mary's, the picture is not fabulous, but these are some of our little girls, a lot of them Latinas.
The blonde one is mine.
The blonde one is there. And they're doing traditional Japanese dancing. So if Anna, you want to come up and just kind of, or sit down.
You want to talk about St. Mary's? Okay.
Talk about St. Mary's and the whole process.
Awesome. Did you want the Guadalupe booklets too?
Oh, we'll
Or you
do
can
that,
talk
yeah,
about this
we'll
later? Okay, cool. So, Nancy and I received one of the Mission Enterprise Zone grants from the Episcopal Church. And one of the things we had to do when we went to the sort of gathering where they were supposed to harvest our learnings, which sounded to me sort of like being abducted by aliens, was that we were supposed to say the one thing that we've learned. And so what I said was, when you're out there all by yourself, doing everything, working really hard, you're doing it wrong. Because this has to be done in a team. And so the most joyful part of my ministry is being a part of a team with the Reverend Nancy Frausto. And I really believe, and she can speak for herself, but I think I could say that I don't think either of us could be thriving in ministry the way we are without being a team. It's so important to do this work together. And I hope that those of you who are sort of, involved in trying to figure out how to move diocesan resources, including people around, and do deployment and those kinds of things, really think about that. Like, how is this person not going to be alone? Because it really is a gift to work together, and we bring different things to the team. So Nancy asked me to talk just a little bit about St. Mary's, and I love the picture that she's chosen, not only because it has my daughter in it, but because it is very much about the particular trajectory of St. Mary's. And I think that it's instructive to the wider church. I mean, people look at us like, oh my God, and we say, it's a historically Japanese American church in Koreatown, which is really a majority Latino neighborhood in LA, and most of the Latinos are actually first language Zapotec speakers, and people's, eyes start to roll back in their heads at that point. But because of the way that non-white ethnic communities are viewed in the United States, people immediately hone in on the fact that there's something distinctive about being a Japanese American congregation. And there is. That congregation has been there for 100 years. They went away to the internment camps together along with their priests. They came back to St. Mary's. It was the very first thing to reopen in the neighborhood when Japanese people and people of Japanese ancestors were allowed back to the West Coast. So there's something precious about St. Mary's and about its history and about its lifelong members. I mean, I just did a birthday blessing for a 96-year-old who was born in the house across the street from the church. So people have that kind of connection to this place. And most of our Japanese American members are 75 and up. The number of their children who are still around, their children are older than I am, is shrinking. The number of their grandchildren that are still around, even as the family tree widens, it's like the reverse family tree at St. Mary's. We have relatively few kids from those old Japanese American families. So part of what I wanted to talk about was the way that we have been attentive to grief in the process of developing ministry in our neighborhood at St. Mary's, which does mean mostly ministry in this indigenous community from Mexico who are bilingual Zapotec Spanish speakers, and their kids are, some are trilingual, some are bilingual in English and Spanish, but growing up in that English-dominant U.S. context. I think sometimes we talk about Latino ministry in the Episcopal Church, and I sort of sigh because I think, like in Southern California, I mean, Latino immigrants do everything for us. They cook our food, they wash our dishes, they raise our children, they clean our swimming pools, they cut our grass, and like, now we want them to fill our churches on their day off, right? Like, we need more people. There's lots of you guys. So, one of the things that struck me as so important about Bishop Curry's speech is that this should be good news for the people who are coming in, not just for like us who are already there, like, yay, now there's more of us. We need to think about how is this actually good news? And part of what is good news to a new community, especially a new community that is experiencing the kind of exclusion and crowding that many new immigrant Latino communities are experiencing, is that it actually has to feel like home. It has to feel like a place where you can let your hair down and take your shoes off and make a mistake or two, and people aren't gonna just like run you right back off the rails. And in order to do that, we have to be attentive to the spiritual underpinnings of what we're doing, which is that we are recognizing that something is dying and hoping for resurrection. We're hoping that something new is going to be reborn and that that new thing is going to be different. And if we don't recognize that, and we don't name that, and we don't attend to the grief of the people who have been there forever, nobody imagines, you know, that their church is going to go on forever and it's going to be filled with completely new people with a totally different culture who speak another language and look nothing like their own grandchildren. Like, that's nobody's imagination of what it would look like for their church to continue. So we have to pay attention to that. We have to pay attention to that process, get people ready for that process, and pay attention to all the ways that it unfolds once the integration of new people starts to happen. And if we don't do that work, not only is it unfair to the people who have poured their lives into building these churches, it's not fair to the new people either. Because they are invited in, God loves you, come to church, you're welcome here, but actually they're interlopers. Actually, they are the living invisible sign of the death of people's hope for their church. And that's a horrible thing to have to be.
She says it with a smile, but we really do feel that.
Yes, we really do sometimes. So part of what we've done at St. Mary's, and helped, I think, by the distinctiveness of the history there. Now, pretty obviously, neither I nor my offspring are Japanese American. So I've done it as an outsider to both communities, the Latino community and the Japanese American community, but is to try to be a pastor to a community that is grieving, that is letting go of hope, not all hope, but letting go of hope that they had held on to pretty tightly, that they would create this Japanese American institution that was so important to them and that would be home forever to successive generations of their own families. So I don't want to take all the time, so I'm gonna wrap my part up. I'm gonna make a little pitch for my new book, which kind of tells this story.
Shameless
It just came
plug.
out last week, and I'm really excited because I've never written a book before and it has my name on the cover. So it's called Claiming Resurrection in the Dying Church, Freedom Beyond Survival. And it's sort of about how we've spiritually framed this process at St. Mary's, and offers some tools, hopefully, for how another congregation in a totally other cultural context might do that, might look at who they are and where they've been and who's around them now and where they are and who they are, how they might find those things out. So starting from a very basic place of like, what if you're totally stuck and your congregation's dying and you don't know what to do next? It's the first chapter. But also then getting into some of this messiness that Nancy talks about. The third section has a chapter called Expect Trespasses. So that idea, maybe the reason Jesus asked us to pray every time we pray, to be forgiven our trespasses and to forgive those who trespass against us, is because they're going to be trespasses. People are going to step on your toes. They're going to break into your house. They're going to use your kitchen implements. And you know, so what does this look like? Once we start to do this thing, how are the new ways that grief manifests? Because we can't always imagine it. In fact, we can hardly ever imagine it at the outset. I think that's one of the things that we help each other be aware of, is that we can make plans and we can have vision, and the best things that happen are usually things we have not imagined or planned for, and lots of our very best ideas just kind of go, you know, But in that process, there's all kinds of things that happen that are hard to foresee at the outset, that you can't just like plan your way towards or through. You just kind of have to get through. So I'd be happy to be a resource also. I've worked in 4 different multi-ethnic, partly Spanish-speaking Episcopal congregations over 18 years, and done a lot of bilingual services, some better than others. So, but I'm going to turn it back to Nancy and wish you the best as you develop your own plans.
So just because I'm hoping I will get lunch after this, there's books here if you would like to get one, or they're on Amazon. So, even though I can't, the book was actually helpful for me in different ways. I figured as a Latina, I would always come in and you know, experience like the unwelcome, and I never really noticed how my presence could be hurtful to a community, because I was just reminding them of what was no longer there. And I think that's something important that we should have a conversation on, in all these places that are dying and all these new people are coming in that don't look anything like us. So check out the book. It's definitely worth it. And I wanted to do this whole hola, hello, gracias, thanks, por favor, please, de nada, you are welcome, because we're going back to this idea of language. As I finish up, I want us to have a conversation on this. There's so much focus on just sticking to being in Spanish and needing priests to speak Spanish. Sure, it's great, but we need them to know our culture. We need them to know what they're getting themselves into. That goes beyond anything else. And I want to hear some thoughts from you. How does this challenge you? Does it challenge you?
I'm from San Antonio, and one of the biggest challenges that we have are raising up Latino priests for ordained ministry. Not only recognizing, but really supporting them and raising them up. In South Texas, our population is 70% Hispanic, 29% Anglo, 1% other. So, there are a lot of Latinos out there. It's just how that's what we've found. That's one of our biggest challenges, is that somehow we're not connecting in a way. So it's a challenge for us.
So one thing that I can share with you is going to the whole seminary, the whole being raised as a leader, that needs to change. And I can tell you that from my experience, it just doesn't speak to our experience, and you're forcing us into this mold. Right. The ordination process, it's hell for everybody for many reasons, but at least in my experience, it tried to strip me away from my identity so I could fit into the Episcopal identity. Mm-hmm. And it was such a big struggle. There is the education issue. A lot of first generation great, could be great priests, they don't have their bachelor's. The highest they did was probably middle school. So how do we work through that? There's a lot of different programs that are being developed. In the Diocese of LA, we tried to do an Instituto de Liderazgo, and the goal was for it to become kind of a way to lead into ordination for those that felt called. We're still struggling with it because the whole accreditation. Este acento no me deja. Accreditation. You got it. Just think about it. But we really need to start looking at that, or we start looking at the seminaries that we have, and how can we raise Latino leaders, but also give the cultural education to the non-Latinos that are part of seminary. Having one class to lead a Spanish Eucharist is stupid. And it annoys me because it takes much more than saying, El Señor sea con ustedes, for you to lead and pastor a Latino ministry. So seminaries need to change. And I think that's the big struggle, because we don't want to change some of those systems.
Yeah, I mean, I would give the example of, we have a young man in our congregation right now who kind of surprised us like a month ago. We were working with him on putting together an application for a fellowship to do this kind of Zapotec language youth leadership project that he has going, which is really cool. He's a super smart guy, completely trilingual in English, Spanish, and Zapotec. And when he wrote this fellowship application, like in the last paragraph, he was sort of laying out what he wanted to do with his future, and he said, and hopefully that will lead to me being eventually ordained as an Episcopal priest. Surprise ending. It was kind of his coming out moment of like, yeah, actually I want to be a priest. But he's brilliant, like really unusually brilliant young man, early 30s. He's like exactly who we say we want in the Episcopal Church. He has an associate's degree. He's also a DACA recipient. But like trying to imagine for him a path to Episcopal ordination is really kind of painful. I mean, for one thing, just because there are so many steps between him and graduating from seminary. And two, because I just know that a lot of the joy he's found in leadership at St. Mary's would get stomped out of him in order to fit into what would be expected of him in that process. And he'll probably do it anyway, because he's way more adventurous than I am. But when we look at somebody like that, who really is already a very accomplished leader in his own community, and it's hard to imagine how we would get from here to there, I think that points to the challenge in front of us, is that it's not really that we can't find people.
What's the second?
You can't have him. He's ours.
Nancy, can I ask you a personal question? So you went to college before you went to seminary?
Yes.
Yes, and you got your degree and then you went to seminary?
Yes.
But tell the story about
And so yeah, and that is one of the big issues, because you know, many of the expectations of the Latino communities, especially when they are the second generation, is that if they go to college, somehow they have to immediately provide for their family.
Not just
based
for
on
themselves, but for the whole
it
family.
is the elements of the economics. And so when I was at the board in the VTS, I challenged the seminary to create a track so that they could offer not necessarily a master's degree, but a license in theology, so that high schoolers could move directly into an educational program and be able to connect with some areas of the church, the work in the church, so that they could continue with the master's degree track. And it's kind of what we had to work in that area in a more creative way, because as Nancy, you know, we are very lucky that she went through the college and then continued to pursue that. But when I was in my church over there in Virginia, many of my kids were, you know, kind of pursuing the priesthood, but they went to college, and after college, I said, sorry.
Well, and I mean, the cost is ridiculous. That's something I feel like.
Well, that's another, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's just another thing. And I mean, really quickly, it took me forever to get through it, because I did not have documents, I couldn't go to the universities that I was accepted into. I had to go through community college because it only cost me $26 a unit.
Okay.
Plus the out-of-state fee for not being a resident of $1,735 for every unit. So I had to work a lot of jobs, and I had to get a lot of scholarships. I was very blessed to have people in my community that found ways for me to get through this. But some of the leaders don't have the possibility. If they have family, if they have children, you know, go to seminary, feed my kids, you know. So I mean, the Episcopal Church needs to think of new ways of doing this, and also in ways that these new leaders coming up are going to be viewed as valid leaders. Because even though I have my master's, because I did not go to your typical seminaries, your resident seminaries, I went to a commuter seminary at Claremont. Even I'm not seen as someone that, you know, did it the right way. It was a commuter seminary. So is my credentials really that great? You know, I've received a lot of that. So that's, the mindset needs to change on that too.
How many dioceses do we know of have their own schools for ministry?
That's actually a good question that I know of. I know LA has it, Chicago has it.
It's increasing. I mean, we have one, it's part of ours is part of the IONA initiative from Seminary of the Southwest, et cetera. We're just getting ready to graduate. But the curriculum's all in English. And so you really need a bivocational person. And we thought we had a great one. We only have one Hispanic congregation, and it fits the first generation model. The priest is from Mexico. I mean, he's got his green card now, but this is very, very first generational, and we're going to have all those problems that you've identified. And we had a person who was second generation from there, who was starting our program, who understood English perfectly well. But his job commitments wouldn't allow him to. We thought we finally had made it. And he started and did a few months and had to drop out. Yeah. I mean, so I get what you're saying. I just know how to get there.
We need to get very creative, and we can't get stuck on this box.
And I know the IONA Initiative curriculum, it has a long-term goal to do it in Spanish or have it available in Spanish as well, but you know, like everything else, it costs. We're barely able to get by in English financially, and Spanish is so expensive.
But even creating a path for the people that you're talking about would be a great first step. And honestly, I mean, the church has resources for all manner of things, so it's partly a question of priorities.
Yes.
And I think of the, whatever we call that structure that was formerly known as the National Church, hearing back from the local level that is a priority. And so when we do these big investments in new ministry and stuff, we think about like, how are we creating paths for, you know, young bilingual college graduates. I mean, we're not even talking about somebody who needs a whole program in Spanish, or who in some cases even needs to go and get a bachelor's degree. You're talking about people who should be reasonably ready to take that track, but that there are still real obstacles. So I would say starting at the place where there's the least resistance, rather than maybe pouring as many resources as we do into creating ways that monolingual Spanish speakers, who frankly are going to have a very hard time functioning as fully included priests in the Episcopal Church anyway, can
do you see some benefit in taking, say, and it's just a thought that I'm in my personal situation of getting a monolingual Spanish, you know, Mexican priest together with an Anglo priest who is, you know, has some Spanish, no, I wouldn't say fluent, you know, I mean, both of them are kind of struggling congregations in a sense. One has a lot of people and no money, and the other has a little more money and no people. They're typical. But I can see that we're going to may need to try to put them together in some fashion. But it would take a team of priests to do that.
It takes a team, and let's not forget the power dynamics.
Oh yeah, I know.
You know, I mean that's a big issue right there when you're putting teams together, because sometimes you put two communities together, and what happens is that Latino priest gets paid a lot less to work a lot more hours, or there's just it's not divided equally when it comes to lay leadership in the vestry or whatever it is. I mean, it has to be as equal as it can be. Right. And they need to be able to get along.
Well, you know, but in that regard is there are some experiences. Actually, right there in Houston, you have one with what is it? The name of the church where Alejandro Montes was. San Mateo, in which used to be an English-speaking congregation, and then the Latino came there and started to move in that direction to the point that, unfortunately, the St. Matthew's people decided to leave San Mateo, to leave this space for the Latinos, and I think it's a parish now, which is an interesting model and transition, but kind of responds a little bit to that issue. But in the element of formation, our diocese is going to start a partnership with the Diocese of San Diego. and in Mexico, so that we will do a program of leadership formation, and that will respond to the first generation needs. We are not following necessarily the ordination track with that, because I think that we have to be realistic on that issue. And we are not pushing the first generation in the direction of the ordination, but what we are trying is to expand the understanding of what ministry is, and that the ministry can be done through non-ordained people, and so that the Latino clergy are overextended in so many ways. But if you have very well-equipped leaders, you can expand the ministry of the church. And that's what we are trying to do with this first generation monolingual in that service. However, the hope is that with that, we can also create a second layer, which is the bilingual, in which most of the kids operate in English.
Right.
They don't think in Spanish, they think in English. And they communicate ideas in English. So those are the generations that can be encouraged to pursue another higher level of Christian formation and education, pursuing the ordination track. But that we are at the beginning of those conversations, and we hope that it's going to render some good results. But the point is that we are going to use the internet, so that the classes will be conducted in one place, but the 3 centers will be connected and will be accessible to share those moments of formation. So,
15 years ago, I was rector of Christ Church in Alameda, California, and it was very clear to me that our sexton, who was from El Salvador, who saw his parents killed by the death squads, was very much called to priesthood. He was extremely spiritual, and his experience had, I think, helped him make himself. I took him up to CDSP and talked to, I can't remember the name of the professor who was the Spanish-speaking guru at the time. He had started a program in Panama. He was very well known in the Episcopal Church. But when he found out that Manuel had only a high school education, it was kind of like you could see the whole conversation just shut down. And the reality is, what I didn't know then is that bishops have a lot more power than seminaries do. Bishops can ordain people without having to go through that traditional model.
Canons do not require a degree.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, and we have people in LA who don't go to
and it breaks my heart to hear you say that you went to Claremont and you were not seen because you were a commuter student. There's so much entitlement in the Episcopal Church that we've got to give that up for Lent for good. And I'm sorry that you experienced that. I would really, really like to see us break down some of these barriers and walls that we set up, because, and I'm speaking as a white male, because we're afraid of losing our power. And we've got to admit that before we can really kind of move forward. And I think all of us can learn from the Diocese of the Rio Grande. That's a tricultural diocese. You have Anglo, Latino, and they don't fit into any of those generational descriptions in there, the Latinos, because they were there first.
The board president.
Like 1545 or something. When the first Book of Common Prayer came out, they were in New Mexico, and Native Americans. And I think we can learn on how to be, the best thing I think we can learn is how to be multicultural ministers, and not just Latino or Japanese American or Native American or Eskimo or whatever. Is how do we cross those cultural boundaries regardless of what they are. And I think if we start working on that, that's going to help us stop cubbyholing Latino ministry, Filipino ministry, you know, all of that is something I think that we desperately need to work on.
Yes.
And your point about grief management is crucial to do that.
Yes, one of the things that are so good that you were talking about, because most of our biracial, the conversation, a diversity conversation is between the white America and the black America. And the rest, we are excluded.
That's right.
And that's why the Latino ministry is so important, because we are trying to assert the presence of the Latino presence to be part of that conversation. And we very often, we are not invited to that conversation.
Yeah.
But the point is exactly, the ultimate goal has to be to go beyond that, to move beyond that. And that would be it.
Without asking people to give up their identity, their heritage, and their culture.
Yeah.
You know, uplifting all of those things.
So I think finding ways that people bring their gifts rather than being asked to kind of leave them at the door is really key. Because so often that vision of like one day we'll be beyond needing, you know, Latino ministries. That vision sometimes is, well, eventually, like, they'll assimilate enough into the Anglo way of doing things that we won't have to separate them out anymore, and that's a problematic vision. So, but when people bring their own gifts, sometimes they really don't look like. I wish we had a picture of Big Jesus to put up on the screen, or San Cristobal, or any number of other. But I mean, you know, people really do bring things that are unfamiliar to the Episcopal, the Anglo-Episcopal tradition, and how we receive them is an open question still. How
I think
far
we usually
we
know,
can
but we receive them with fear, trepidation, unfortunately.
Or weird romanticization. I mean, I think there's all kinds of different. And we're like, oh, that's so folkloric.
Well, it's already past our time, so thank you so much. I hope you learned a lot, and I really hope you connect with us, and we can continue the conversation.